trust yourself to see that from now on we trust ourselves implicitly. We trust in you and me.
I can say, hand on heart, that I have absolutely no doubt whatsoever that there are already enough people on this planet who are ready for this. There are already enough people on these islands who are ready for this. All we're saying is, no more fraud, no more genocide, no more moneyed aristocracy, control of absolutely everything in the position that we currently find ourselves in, where it's impossible to go into a court and get justice unless it benefits the Crown or the banksters. When every single natural right has been stripped from us, just because, and this is the critical part, just because we acquiesced to the system that we were pre-programmed to believe we, as one individual, could not change. When it is only every one of us taking equal responsibility for our own actions and to mutually cooperate with the rest of mankind, it is only through those actions that we're going to be able to provide an environment that is conducive to the self-realization of our children and ourselves, so that we no longer have to continue as the only species on this planet that has to pay for our very existence. How many people do we know who are just part of a system that is the embodiment of the perpetuation of fraud, deceit, corruption, and mass murder? How many people do we know within that system who would willingly and immediately give it all up if they thought that there was a viable alternative?
1. An end to all crimes against mankind and the earth that are currently being perpetrated by governments, whether elected or not, corporations, organisations, individuals and legal entities of all natures and descriptions. 2. The dismantling of all industries which, by developing, manufacturing and exploiting for profit any substance, product or byproduct, cause actual damage, harm, injury or loss to mankind and or damage to the earth. 3. The deconstruction of unsustainable fiscal systems that would facilitate one man to have and one man to have not, including, without limitation, the abolition of usury in all its forms and the demonopolization of land rights, international borders, mediums of exchange, trading platforms, and the means of communicating, publishing and distributing information. 4. The nullifying, settlement and or discharge of all outstanding or allegedly owed debts, obligations and liabilities with a view to replacing unaccountable, unsustainable and inequitable usury-based financial systems with localized and autonomous permanent credit facilities or depositories in every community that stands under the jurisdiction of Universal Community Trust. 5. The eradication of all forms of artificial scarcity and its effects, including homelessness, famine and disease, by and through the facilitation of a naturally abundant, peaceful, free and harmonious environment for mankind to dwell, and the distribution of organic materials, agricultural produce, seeds and proven natural health remedies. 6. The dissolution of mankind's dependence upon fossil fuel industries for the production of energy, including, without limitation, coal seam gas mining, coal-fired power stations and oil drilling, as well as the cessation of all toxic pollution of the biosphere of the earth in any detrimental form whatsoever, whether it be gaseous, liquid, solid or radioactive, and the closure and clean-up of all unsafe nuclear power facilities. 7. The rapid development, manufacture, distribution and implementation of new and existing free and clean energy technologies in every community upon the earth under Universal Community Trust. 8. A ceasefire in all wars, the repatriation of all armed services personnel, following the repudiation of all unlawful allegiances, and the setting aside of all oaths made in the service of private interests to the detriment of mankind, and the unequivocal commitment of the parties to this treaty to recall and withdraw any and all beneficiaries of Universal Community Trust from every armed conflict at the earliest opportunity. 9. The establishment of cooperative trade networks in and between all communities with a view to promoting the localization of trade, self-sufficiency, mutual cooperation, and the eventual replacement of money with unconditional pledges of sweat equity, which shall form the basis for the permanent credit of every beneficiary of Universal Community Trust. 10. An agreement that privately issued promissory notes made payable to bearer on demand by any grantor, trustee, or beneficiary of Universal Community Trust may be used for the purposes of settling any valid financial obligation or to create credits in their account held at the community's depository, the balance of which will be transferable to any account in another jurisdiction, provided those credits are not used for any purpose that is detrimental to mankind and/or the earth. 11. The nullifying of any and all judicial proceedings and convictions for victimless crimes, as well as the positive law which legalized such unlawful proceedings, and the prohibition and prevention of any man being charged with future crimes. 12. The facilitation of the re-emergence of the universal bond of common unity between the free indigenous peoples of the earth in order to achieve these aims and objectives in the most peaceful, amicable, and equitable manners.
Let all in this room who consent and authorize the ratification of this treaty say aye. Aye. Let all who do not consent say nay.
On the 3rd of March 2013 CE, 6 months had passed since the Secretary of State to the Foreign Office received a copy of the Treaty of Universal Community Trust, formed on behalf of Her Majesty's Government, following its original ratification on the 21st of June 2012. 28 independent nations have now fulfilled the accession criteria, with many others having expressed a willingness to do so. Under the authority granted to me by the founding sovereign nations standing under Universal Community Trust, the following presentment was dispatched to Queen Elizabeth II at Buckingham Palace by special delivery on the 15th of March 2013, in acknowledgement of the acquiescence of Her Majesty's Government to the terms, aims and objectives of the treaty, as well as its implicit recognition of the independence, sovereignty and jurisdiction established by its ratification under the well-established principles of the law of nations. This document may be used to inform any interested, concerned or affected parties that the nations of peoples standing under Universal Community Trust are not bound by or signatory to any other treaties or conventions, but will nevertheless adhere to the principles set forth in the Treaty of Universal Community Trust, the Treaty, which are in accord with the general principles of the law of nations. Summary. A. Pursuant to the terms of the treaty, which were publicly declared, witnessed and ratified for and on behalf of the free indigenous sovereign peoples of the islands of Britain and North America on the 21st of June 2012, a copy of which was considered served upon Her Majesty's Secretary of State to the Foreign and Commonwealth Office by special delivery to the Treaty Section on the 31st of August 2012. B. Acknowledging the absence of any possibility of a legal objection by Her Majesty's Government to the proclaimed rights of any indigenous peoples to independence, self-determination and self-governance, wherever their ancestral lands may be, in accordance with the generally established principles of international law and convention, including, without limitation, the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties 1969 and the Convention on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples 2007, by which Her Majesty's Government has agreed to be bound. C. In consideration of the fact that it is well established under the principles laid down in Book 2, Chapter 1, Article 6 of the Law of Nations, that all nations will assist each other in the perfection of other nations, whether in the event of any indigenous peoples declaring their right to independence, self-determination and self-governance, or otherwise. Wherefore, the following points set forth the mutual understanding that has arisen by the tacit agreement of the parties. 1. Her Majesty's Government implicitly recognizes the validity of the treaty, its aims and objectives. 2. Her Majesty's Government implicitly recognizes the sovereignty, independence and autonomy of the indigenous nations of peoples who stand under the jurisdiction of Universal Community Trust, UCT. 3. Her Majesty's Government implicitly accepts that the peoples of the sovereign nations concerned have pledged their sacred honour and allegiance to Universal Community Trust by way of international treaty and duly ratified compacts, thereby repudiating all former pledges of those peoples, whether expressed or implied, to any other nations. 4. Her Majesty's Government acknowledges that the natural law jurisdiction established by the nation standing under Universal Community Trust is now a clearly defined, separate and superior jurisdiction for the resolution of both civil and criminal matters. 5. Her Majesty's Government accepts that it has an obligation under the established principles of the law of nations to cooperate with the community of nations under Universal Community Trust in order to facilitate the restoration of ancestral lands and natural resources to the peoples of those nations. 6. The parties agree that any and all civil disputes will be settled in a timely and peaceful manner, in accordance with the Peaceful Settlement of Disputes Doctrine, by international arbitral tribunals, in the absence of a private equitable settlement within 6 months of a dispute arising by notice. All criminal allegations, if any, will be heard by a Supreme Grand Jury under the jurisdiction of Universal Community Trust unless otherwise agreed by the parties. 7. The parties concur that this memorandum constitutes a formal sealed proclamation of the participating nations' ratification and or accession to the terms of the treaty, originally executed on the 21st of June 2012 CE by the founding sovereign nations of Universal Community Trust. Whilst this document is not legally enforceable, it may be used as evidence that the independence, sovereignty and jurisdiction of UCT has been implicitly recognized.
No longer play their evil game, 'cause no matter what we do, it all turns out the same. It harms our fellow men. So it's time to stop and trust in love and start again. There's a new community of equal souls in equity and universal unity, the trust we call the UCT. And in our new community, we'll take a drink together free. Tell me, what drink do you see? I see coffee, UCT.